Hello friends! In today's episode we build a box. Stay tuned! Alright, this was a freestyle project. I had a piece of oak left over from when I made the Mission Stool, and I ended up just cutting one piece for the front and back that would be longer than a piece for the left and right sides. And I wanted a piece that was as long as the front and back to eventually use as the top. Then I ripped the piece for the front and back and left and right sides to the biggest width that was possible, and in my case it was about 3.5 inches. I had a random piece of hardboard and I decided that I was going to attach this with rabbets going along the whole bottom and use that as the base of the box. And as always, if you enjoy woodworking entertainment, be sure to let me know by checking me out on Patreon. Thanks! Then, very carefully, I put a 45-degree bevel on the front, back, left, and right, and I am not very good at this yet. I need to find a better way of doing it, but that's neither here nor there. The glue-up was kind of fun. I put tape on the corners of all these 4 pieces and glue in the grooves and in the side crack, and I glued it up. Because of all the glue that was involved in this project, it actually took a couple days to make because I wanted to make sure the joints had enough time to dry while in clamps. Well, remember that board that was as long as the front and back sides? Yep, that's going to be the top. So I glued it all around and I put a whole bunch of clamps and let it dry overnight. While the top was drying, I took this scrap piece of walnut and I made it about 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, and I made some 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch cubes, 4 of them in fact, to be the legs for the box. Well, the next day, once the glue had dried, it was time for me to get rid of that excess material on the top, but I don't have a flush trim bit for my router, so I had to be creative. So I trimmed off one end, and then I put my blade to about a 10-degree bevel, and I just gently shaved off the top bit by bit until it looked good on all 4 sides. Okay, so this is the spline part. This is the first time I had done splines. First time I've made a box like this. Very steep learning curve for me. Some of the splines were a little too tight, some were a little bit too loose, but in the end it all worked out fine. I had this very thick, randomly sized piece of purple heart that I ended up cutting up, and it was just enough to make splines. So once I made them and I let the glue dry overnight, I got to cut them off. I have this flush trim handsaw here, but of course I didn't do it properly and I ended up chipping out some of the corners in the splines, which was really irritating because I had to put a 1/4 inch round over basically on the 4 sides of the box to compensate. See, there's some of that chip out. So I think some more practice is involved as time goes by. And then it was time for me to replace my really old belt with a brand new belt of 80 grit. Wow, what a difference that makes. It's amazing how well you can sand when you have grit on your sandpaper. So that cleaned things up nicely, and in fact it rounded over those corners just beautifully. So now it was time to cut the box open. And I just rose my blade just more than 3/4 of an inch thick. I didn't need to penetrate too deeply, and I cut all 4 sides. And on the top you can see I put a little bit of a wedge so I didn't skew the blade. And I did it pretty well. Not perfect, but that's okay. It came out pretty well. And now using magic, I cut this oak 2x4 into a couple of 1/4 inch thick pieces of inlay. I stained them a purpley red color instead of this dark walnut that I had on hand because I thought it would go well with the purple heart on the outside. And then it was time to attach the hinges, and believe it or not, I've never actually attached hinges in this fashion before. So I marked out where they needed to go, I took it to the router, I took off some of the material, then I finished the rest of it off with a hand chisel, and we were set to pre-drill my holes and hand drive in the screws, and it worked beautifully. I ended up attaching the top to this, making sure it was lined up properly by using super glue and letting it sit for just a little bit. It's a great technique. Here I am adding that stained inlay from earlier for a decorative touch to give a little bit more depth for the things that I'm storing and to add some compartments. And I also made a cute little handle out of a piece of scrap walnut, and I carved a pattern in using my table saw. Then it was time to apply the finish, and I just used paste wax. I rubbed it in 2 or 3 times, lightly buffing in between each coat, and I think it came out really nicely. I just like when you enhance the natural colors of the wood instead of necessarily staining everything. So that's why you see that in a lot of my pieces. The final product here turned out real well. You can see it's got a nice shine. In this light, you can't tell that the color has changed at all. It almost looks very natural. But in reality, it's got a nice golden shine to it. And there you have it. I was looking to practice a couple techniques with this box. I wanted to get my 90-degree corners perfect. I wanted to learn how to use splines a little bit and a few other things. So I'm very pleased with the result, and I think I have a couple other boxes in the future. I need to make myself a jewelry box, and I mean, you can always use a box for something. So there might be a box playlist sometime in the future, but who knows when. So have you built any boxes? If so, let me know in the comments section below. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I'm the Midwest Man Mountain. Thank you for subscribing. And until next time, bye!